please.
Subscribe.
Hey everybody, Jefferson Webster here. It's time to fill out those brackets. Bro, your picks were terrible last year. Awful. Well, first of all, those weren't my picks. Those were a simulation from PlayStation 3 using updated rosters. Second, let's just take a minute and break these picks down. The PlayStation 3 did just as well as Andy Katz did last year, and he does this for a living. Charles Barkley got 3 out of the Elite 8 right, which seems somewhat impressive given the chaos that ensued. However, Bruce from accounting tied him by merely picking 1 and 2 seeds throughout. Yeah, whatever, bro. March Madness has always been a little bit of art and science. Gotta get the mix right. Art the fart. So college guy, are you filling out a bracket this year? Nah, that's dumb, bro. I'm all about parlays. I'm gonna take this dollar and turn it into thousands of dollars. You watch. Well, good luck with that. Once again, I want to thank the group that updates the rosters annually for this PlayStation 3 simulation. For more information about the update and the group, check out the description in the video. Additionally, if you're a degenerate gambler and you like to read, check out The Parlay by Jefferson Webster. All right, let's get into it. So for the play-in games, we've got Arizona State versus Nevada. Arizona State. Given that this game's a little bit older, you kind of have to create a custom tournament on the side here. Mississippi State versus Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh with the victory. Texas Southern versus Fairleigh Dickinson. Fairleigh Dickinson's going to win this one. And then I was missing the other games for the 16 games, so indulge me here. Let's go on to the South. You've got Alabama versus a 16 seed I didn't have. Alabama wins. West Virginia versus Maryland. West Virginia wins. San Diego State versus Charleston. Charleston pulls off the upset. Virginia versus Furman. Virginia with the victory. Creighton versus NC State. NC State with the upset. Baylor versus UC Santa Barbara. Baylor with the victory. Missouri versus Utah State. Utah State gets the win. Arizona versus Princeton. Princeton with a big upset. On to the second round of the South. Alabama versus West Virginia. The 1 seed Alabama moves on. Charleston versus Virginia. Virginia wins. NC State versus Baylor. The Baylor Bears move on. And Utah State versus Princeton. Utah State. Alabama versus Virginia. Virginia pulls off the upset. Baylor versus Utah State. Baylor wins. So for the Elite 8, you've got Virginia and Baylor pulls off the victory, going on to the Final Four. On to the Midwest Regional, you've got Houston versus Youngstown State. Houston wins. Iowa versus Auburn. Auburn with the victory. Miami versus Drake. Drake pulling off the upset. Indiana versus Kent State. Indiana wins. Iowa State versus Pittsburgh. Iowa State. Xavier versus Kennesaw State. Xavier. Buzz Williams, all right, Aggies, let's go! Texas A&M versus Penn State. The Aggies with the victory. Texas versus Colgate. Texas. On to the second round of the Midwest. You've got Houston versus Auburn. Houston with the victory. Drake versus Indiana. The Hoosiers moving on. Iowa State versus Xavier. Iowa State with the upset. And Texas A&M versus Texas. Oh man, come on! Texas with the victory. Houston versus Indiana. Houston with the victory. And Iowa State versus Texas. Texas. So you've got Houston versus Texas squaring off, and Houston is going to the Final Four. Over to the East Regional, we've got Southeast Missouri versus Purdue, and wowzers, that was a close game, but Purdue barely sneaks out, beating the 16 seed. Next, you've got Memphis versus Florida Atlantic, and Memphis is going to pull this one off. Duke versus Oral Roberts. Duke with the victory. Tennessee versus Louisiana. Tennessee with the victory. Not a lot of upsets this year. Kentucky versus Providence. Kentucky. KU! 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 Kansas State versus Montana State, and Montana State with the victory. USC versus Michigan State, USC pulling off the win. Marquette versus Vermont, Marquette. On to the second round of the East, you got Purdue and Memphis. Purdue moves on. Duke versus Tennessee, Tennessee with the victory. Montana State versus Kentucky, Montana State keeps it going. USC versus Marquette, and USC with the upset. Purdue versus Tennessee, Purdue wins. And Montana State versus USC, Montana State keeping it going. So you've got Purdue versus Montana State, and Purdue is going to the Final Four. Over to the West, you've got Kansas versus Howard, Kansas.
Bro, Illinois? I'm not falling in that trap again. They always choke.
Arkansas versus Illinois, and St. Mary's versus VCU. VCU. UConn versus Iona. UConn with the victory. TCU versus Arizona State. Arizona State with the upset. Gonzaga versus Grand Canyon. Gonzaga takes care of business. Northwestern versus Boise State. Boise State wins. UCLA versus UNC Asheville. UCLA. On to the second round of the West. Kansas versus Illinois. Kansas with the victory. VCU versus UConn. VCU again with the upset. Arizona State versus Gonzaga. Gonzaga with the victory. And UCLA versus Boise State. UCLA. Kansas versus VCU. Kansas with the victory. Gonzaga versus UCLA. UCLA with the victory. So Kansas and UCLA square off, and Kansas moves on to the Final Four. So almost what Bruce in accounting did. You've got 3 1 seeds, so you've got Purdue and Kansas, and Purdue knocks off Kansas, and then on the other side you've got Baylor versus Houston. Baylor with the win, so Purdue versus Baylor national title. Purdue is your national champion.
Well guys, that's it. Make sure you subscribe to my channel to see more of my videos and enjoy the NCAA tournament. See ya!